My sister shoved my son's face into his birthday cake and burned him, so my grandma showed up with a baseball bat, and what happened next made her go pale. I am Natalie, 34 years old, and I never imagined my carefully planned celebration would end in tears and burned skin. For weeks, I'd been organizing the perfect 10th birthday party for my son, Lucas, complete with a custom galaxy cake that took hours to design. My sister, Amber, always harbored jealousy toward me, but I never thought she would target my innocent child. As Lucas stood beaming before his dream cake, ready to make a wish, none of us anticipated the moment that would fracture our family forever. Lucas has always been the center of my world since the moment he was born. As a single child, each of his birthdays holds special significance for our family. But turning 10 felt particularly momentous, double digits, as Lucas kept reminding us with excitement for months leading up to the celebration. My husband David and I wanted to make it perfect. Lucas developed a passionate interest in astronomy around age 7. His bedroom ceiling is covered with glow-in-the-dark stars that we painstakingly arranged into accurate constellations. He can name every planet, major moon, and countless stars. For his birthday, we splurged on a telescope that we kept hidden in our garage, wrapped and waiting for the big reveal. But what Lucas was most excited about was the cake. I spent weeks collaborating with a local bakery that specializes in custom designs. The cake was a masterpiece, a 3-tiered creation with hand-painted galaxies, edible glitter stars, and planets made from fondant. The inside was marbled with blue and purple swirls, and between the layers was a surprise filling of star-shaped sprinkles that would spill out when cut. It cost nearly $300, but seeing Lucas's face light up would be worth every penny. The backdrop to this celebration was a family dynamic that had been strained for years. My sister Amber is 3 years younger than me, and our relationship has always been complicated. As children, she seemed determined to compete for every scrap of attention, particularly from our father, Richard. While I excelled in academics, Amber sought the spotlight through drama, both on stage and off. One particular memory stands out from my 16th birthday. My parents had given me a beautiful silver necklace with a small diamond pendant, my first piece of real jewelry. During the party, it mysteriously disappeared from my neck. Hours later, we found it in Amber's pocket. She claimed I had let her borrow it despite everyone knowing I had been wearing it all day. Even faced with this evidence, my father defended her, suggesting there must have been a misunderstanding. This pattern continued into adulthood. When I graduated college, Amber showed up late to the ceremony and drunk. When I announced my engagement to David, she spent the entire dinner talking about her own relationship problems. When Lucas was born, she visited the hospital only briefly, claiming the baby smell gave her a headache. Recently, Amber's life had taken several difficult turns. Her marriage of 5 years ended when her husband left her for his coworker. She lost her job at a marketing firm due to budget cuts. She moved back into our father's house temporarily, which only seemed to intensify her resentment toward me and my relatively stable life. David had reservations about inviting Amber to Lucas's party. She always finds a way to make things about her, he reminded me the night before as we hung decorations. Are you sure you want to risk it? I did harbor concerns, but something in me still hoped for reconciliation. She's still his aunt, I reasoned. And Dad would be upset if we excluded her. Besides, it's a kids' party with 20 people around. How much damage could she really do? My grandmother, Eleanor, would also be attending. At 78, she remained sharp as a tack and was the family's moral backbone. Growing up, she had been my safe harbor during family storms, the one who always saw through pretenses and stood firmly on the side of truth, even when it was uncomfortable. Eleanor had raised my father as a single mother after my grandfather died in Vietnam, working 2 jobs and never remarrying. She understood sacrifice and had little patience for self-pity or drama. The day before the party, I transformed our backyard into a space-themed wonderland. David hung string lights to mimic stars. We set up the telescope for the children to take turns looking at the afternoon moon. Tables were covered with dark blue cloths sprinkled with silver confetti. Party favors included mini astronaut action figures, space rock candy, and constellation booklets. Lucas could barely sleep the night before. I tucked him in, surrounded by his space books and NASA posters, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Tomorrow's going to be the best day ever, Mom," he whispered. I kissed his forehead and promised him it would be perfect. I had no idea how wrong I would be or how a celebration of life would become a moment that would nearly destroy the fabric of our family. If only I could go back to that peaceful moment and somehow prepare for what was coming. The morning of the party arrived with perfect weather, sunshine warming the April day to a comfortable 70 degrees. Lucas woke up at 6:30, bursting into our bedroom, fully dressed in his NASA t-shirt and space-themed sneakers, ready hours before any guest would arrive. "Today I'm officially a decade old," he announced proudly, bouncing on the foot of our bed. David groaned good-naturedly and pulled himself upright. "The birthday astronaut has landed," he said, giving Lucas a hug. Ready for launch countdown to the party. By noon, our home was prepared for the invasion of excited 10-year-olds and family members. The cake was scheduled for delivery at 2, just before the party started. My father Richard arrived early, offering to help with last-minute arrangements, though he spent most of the time checking his phone. "Is Amber coming?" he asked casually, though I could hear the underlying concern. "She said she would be here," I replied, arranging juice boxes in a cooler. "I texted her this morning to confirm." Richard nodded, looking relieved. "She's been having a hard time lately, Natalie. Try to be understanding if she seems a little off." I bit my tongue to avoid pointing out that Amber had been having a hard time for most of her 31 years. Instead, I simply nodded and continued with preparations. The first guests arrived at 2:30, Lucas's best friend Tyler and his parents, bearing a large gift wrapped in rocket ship paper. Tyler and Lucas immediately ran to the backyard to examine the space-themed games David had set up. Other children and parents followed, filling our home with excited chatter and laughter. My grandmother Eleanor arrived wearing a blue dress and bringing a small but thoughtfully chosen gift, a book about women in space exploration that I knew Lucas would treasure. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Everything looks wonderful, dear. You've done a beautiful job." The cake arrived on schedule, even more spectacular than I had imagined. I carefully stored it in our garage refrigerator, saving the reveal for later. 20 children explored our backyard space station, completing mission challenges for prizes and taking turns at the telescope. By 3:30, everyone had arrived except Amber. I tried not to let it bother me, focusing instead on refilling snack bowls and helping David organize the next game. Then, just as we were about to start the scavenger hunt for moon rocks hidden throughout the yard, Amber made her entrance. She wore a tight black dress, more suitable for a cocktail party than a child's birthday, carrying a gift box from an expensive electronics store. I noticed immediately that she seemed slightly unsteady, her smile too wide, her laugh too loud. She had been drinking. "There's the birthday boy," she announced, cutting through a group of parents to reach Lucas. She thrust the box into his hands. "Your favorite aunt brought you something amazing." Lucas, always polite, thanked her and set the gift with the others for later. "We're about to start a game, Aunt Amber. Do you want to play?" "Games are for kids," she said dismissively. "I'll watch with the other adults." The scavenger hunt proceeded with children racing around the yard searching for painted rocks. I kept one eye on Amber as she made her way to the drinks table, bypassing the punch bowl in favor of the wine we had set out for the adults. My father immediately gravitated to her side, their heads bent in conversation. "She's already 3 sheets to the wind," Eleanor murmured beside me, her eyes tracking Amber. "And Richard is enabling as usual." "It's fine," I said automatically, though worry gnawed at my stomach. As long as the kids are having fun. The afternoon progressed with present opening, space trivia, and a piñata shaped like a rocket ship. Lucas was in his element, beaming with joy, surrounded by friends. I began to relax, thinking perhaps we would get through the day without incident after all. Throughout the activities, however, I noticed Amber making increasingly less subtle comments within my earshot. "Must be nice to afford all this for a kid's party," she said to another parent while examining the telescope. "Some people have all the luck." When Lucas opened her gift, a gaming system that I knew was well beyond what she could afford given her financial situation, she made a point of announcing the price loudly enough for everyone to hear. Only the best for my nephew. $700 is nothing when you love someone. My father beamed with pride at her generosity, apparently unconcerned by the inappropriateness of both the gift and her behavior. David caught my eye across the yard, his expression a mix of concern and "I told you so." As the afternoon wore on, Amber's glass never seemed to empty, and her comments grew more pointed. She cornered me in the kitchen as I prepared to bring out the cake. "Such a perfect mom," she slurred slightly, leaning against the counter. "Perfect house, perfect husband, perfect kid. Do you ever get tired of being so damn perfect, Natalie?" "Amber, this is Lucas's day," I said quietly. "Can we not do this now?" "Do what?" "I'm just making conversation with my beloved sister." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad was just saying how amazing you are hosting this whole space extravaganza. He's so proud." I doubted that was an accurate representation of their conversation, but I chose not to engage. "Can you tell everyone we're ready for cake? I need to get it from the garage." Amber's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded and returned to the yard. I took a moment to compose myself, reminding myself that the party was almost over. Just cake, a few more games, and then everyone would leave. We could handle this. With David's help, I carefully carried the spectacular galaxy cake from the garage to the backyard. A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests, followed by excited chatter from the children. Lucas's eyes widened, his mouth forming a perfect O of astonishment. "Mom, it's amazing," he breathed, circling the table to view the cake from all angles. "It looks just like the Andromeda Galaxy on this side." Everyone gathered around, phones raised to capture the moment. My heart swelled with pride and love seeing Lucas so happy. For that brief shining moment, everything was perfect. I had no idea that in less than 5 minutes that perfection would shatter completely. The galaxy cake sat at the center of the table, 3 tiers of astronomical wonder. The bottom layer was deep purple fading to midnight blue, dotted with tiny edible stars that seemed to twinkle under the sunlight. The middle tier featured swirling nebulas in vibrant pinks and greens, while the top tier showcased our solar system with each planet meticulously crafted from fondant. 10 candles were arranged to form a constellation, waiting to be lit. Lucas stood before his masterpiece, his eyes reflecting the wonder of a child seeing magic made real. Friends clustered around him, equally mesmerized by the confectionery creation. Even the adults paused their conversations to admire the artistry. "Make a wish that's out of this world," David said, ruffling Lucas's hair as he lit the candles one by one. The flames created dancing shadows across the frosted galaxies. I started the traditional birthday song, and everyone joined in. Lucas closed his eyes, concentrating hard on his wish. As the song concluded, he took a deep breath, ready to blow out the candles, marking his first decade of life. That's when it happened. In a motion so swift I barely registered it beginning, Amber stepped forward from beside my father and placed her hand firmly on the back of Lucas's head. With shocking force, she shoved his face downward into the cake, his forehead and nose connecting with the top tier where the candles were still burning. The singing cut off abruptly. Lucas screamed, the sound muffled by frosting, before he jerked backward, his face covered in blue and purple icing. But what turned my blood cold was the small red mark forming on his right cheek where a candle had seared his skin. "Lucas!" I rushed forward, pulling him away from the ruined cake. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. Tears cut tracks through the frosting on his face. The yard had fallen completely silent. 20 children stared in horror. Parents froze mid-conversation. My father's mouth hung open in surprise. Amber laughed, a harsh sound in the stillness. "Lighten up. It's a cake smash. It's tradition." Lucas whimpered as I gently wiped frosting from around his eyes. "Mom, it burns," he whispered, touching his cheek where an angry red welt was forming. "David, get ice," I called, my voice tight with controlled panic. David was already moving, sprinting toward the house. "What were you thinking?" I turned to Amber, unable to keep the fury from my voice. The candles were still lit. "Oh, please. It's just a tiny burn," Amber rolled her eyes, reaching for her wine glass. Kids get hurt all the time. He'll live. Tyler's mother, a nurse, stepped forward. Let me see, Lucas, she said gently, examining his cheek. It's a minor burn, first degree only, but we should treat it right away. David returned with ice wrapped in a clean kitchen towel, which Tyler's mother carefully applied to Lucas's cheek. Lucas was trying hard not to cry in front of his friends, his bottom lip trembling with the effort. I think you should leave, I said to Amber, my voice low but firm. Are you serious? Amber's eyes widened in manufactured innocence. It was a joke, Natalie. God, you always overreact to everything. My father finally found his voice, stepping forward to place a hand on Amber's shoulder. Now, Natalie, I'm sure Amber didn't mean any harm. These things happen at parties. Remember when we did the same to you on your 12th birthday? His defense of her actions sent a wave of disbelief through me. Dad, I was not pushed into lit candles on my 12th birthday. Lucas has a burn on his face. A tiny burn, Amber interjected, barely noticeable. And the cake was going to be cut up anyway. That's not the point, David said, his normally calm demeanor giving way to anger. You deliberately hurt our son on his birthday. Eleanor stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding immediate attention. Richard, she addressed my father, her voice steady but cold. Are you actually defending this behavior? My father shifted uncomfortably. I'm just saying accidents happen, Mom. The kids are still having fun, right kids? The children remained silent, some looking at their feet, others staring at the ruined cake. One small girl was crying quietly. This was no accident, Eleanor stated flatly. And I think you know that, Richard. Parents began to murmur among themselves, some checking the time on their phones, clearly looking for a graceful exit from the increasingly uncomfortable situation. A few approached me quietly, offering sympathetic words and help cleaning up. I think we should move inside and get Lucas properly cleaned up, Tyler's mother suggested tactfully. Maybe the other children could watch a movie while you sort things out. I nodded gratefully, still too shocked and angry to form a coherent plan. David guided the children inside while I attended to Lucas in the kitchen, carefully washing frosting from his hair and face, paying special attention to the burned area. Why did Aunt Amber do that, Mom? Lucas asked, his voice small. The confusion in his eyes was almost worse than the pain. Is she mad at me? No, sweetheart, I assured him, though my heart ached with the inadequacy of my explanation. Aunt Amber made a very bad choice. It had nothing to do with you. In the living room, I could hear Amber's voice rising in pitch, still defending her actions to the remaining adults. It's a tradition, everyone does cake smashes. You're all acting like I committed some horrible crime. My father's voice joined hers. Amber apologized. What more do you want from her? She did not apologize, David corrected firmly. Not once. I returned to the backyard with Lucas, his face now clean but sporting an angry red mark on his right cheek. The bakery had included a box of matching cupcakes with the cake order, which David was now arranging on a tray as a replacement. Look, buddy, David said with forced cheerfulness. We still have special space cupcakes for everyone, and you get first pick. Lucas attempted a smile, but I could see the joy had been thoroughly drained from his day. Several parents were gathering their children, making polite but hasty exits. The magical atmosphere of the party had been shattered beyond repair. You've ruined his birthday, I said to Amber when Lucas was distracted by choosing a cupcake. I want you to leave now. Fine, she snapped, grabbing her purse. I try to add some fun to this boring party and get treated like a criminal. Typical Natalie, always the victim. My father stepped between us. Natalie, you're overreacting. It was just a silly prank that went a little wrong. Lucas is fine. He is not fine, I hissed, keeping my voice low to prevent Lucas from hearing. He has a burn on his face and his birthday is destroyed. If you ask Amber to leave, I'm going to, my father declared as if this ultimatum would make me reconsider. That's your choice, David said, joining the conversation. His tone left no room for argument. But either way, this party is over for both of you. Eleanor stood silently beside Lucas, her hand gently resting on his shoulder as she helped him select a cupcake. Her eyes, however, never left the confrontation unfolding across the yard. I would later learn how significant that quiet observation would prove to be. As Amber and my father gathered their things to leave, neither offering a genuine apology to Lucas, I felt something break inside me. This wasn't just about a ruined cake or even a minor burn that would heal. This was about years of toxic behavior being excused, enabled, and perpetuated. This was about my innocent child becoming the latest target in a pattern I had endured my entire life. I watched them walk to my father's car. Amber glanced back once with an expression that held not remorse, but something closer to satisfaction. In that moment, I knew something had to change. I just didn't yet realize how dramatic that change would be, or that my quiet, dignified grandmother would be the catalyst that would shatter our family's foundations forever. The remainder of Lucas's birthday passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow cheerfulness. David and I did our best to salvage the celebration, serving cupcakes and organizing a few final games, but the damage was done. The children were subdued, the parents awkward and overly sympathetic. By 5:30, everyone had left except Eleanor, who silently helped us clean up the backyard. The ruined galaxy cake sat on the table, a painful reminder of the day's events. Lucas's face print was clearly visible in the top tier, surrounded by broken candles and smeared frosting. It looked almost violent, like a crime scene of childhood joy. What should we do with it? David asked quietly as we stood surveying the remains. Throw it away, I said, surprised by the bitterness in my voice. All that work, all that money, for nothing. Eleanor approached with a garbage bag. I'll take care of this. Why don't you check on Lucas? I found my son in his bedroom already changed into pajamas despite the early hour. He sat on his bed examining his new telescope, the one bright spot in an otherwise disastrous day. The burn on his cheek had faded to a dull red mark, but I knew the emotional wound ran deeper. How are you feeling, Space Captain? I asked, sitting beside him. Lucas shrugged, not meeting my eyes. It's okay, Mom. The party wasn't that bad. His attempt to comfort me broke my heart. Lucas, what happened today was not okay. Your aunt was wrong, and so was Grandpa for defending her. Grandpa always takes Aunt Amber's side, Lucas observed with the simple clarity of a child, even when she does mean things. Yes, I admitted, realizing I couldn't shield him from this family truth any longer. That's a pattern that's gone on for a very long time. Lucas touched his cheek gently. Why does Aunt Amber hate me? Oh, sweetheart, I pulled him close. Aunt Amber doesn't hate you. She's unhappy with her own life, and sometimes unhappy people hurt others because they're hurting inside. That's stupid, Lucas declared with 10-year-old certainty. If I'm sad, I don't push someone's face in a cake. Despite everything, I laughed. You're right. It is stupid and not something that grown-ups should do. After tucking Lucas in early, exhausted from the emotional day, I joined David and Eleanor in the kitchen. David was washing dishes with more force than necessary, his jaw set in anger. I told you inviting her was a mistake, he said as I entered. I'm sorry, but I did. I know, I sighed, collapsing into a chair. I just never thought she'd target Lucas. Me, yes, but not a child, not her nephew. Eleanor sat across from me, her hands folded on the table. In the overhead light, she looked older than her 78 years, the lines in her face deeper. This has been building for years, she said quietly. Richard has enabled Amber's behavior since she was small, and now she has no boundaries. Dad called while you were upstairs, David informed me, drying his hands on a towel. He said we owe Amber an apology for embarrassing her in front of everyone. Can you believe that? Fresh anger surged through me. We owe her an apology? Our son has a burn on his face. Richard has always been blind where Amber is concerned, Eleanor observed. But this crosses a line. Hurting a child is unforgivable. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic outside. I felt hollow, drained of emotion, yet somehow still churning with anger. What now? I finally asked, looking between my husband and grandmother. Do we just pretend this never happened the next time we see them? Go back to walking on eggshells around Amber? David leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I don't want her around Lucas again. Not until she gets help, at minimum. I nodded in agreement. But you know Dad will never accept that. He'll say we're being dramatic and unfair. Then perhaps Richard needs to make a choice, Eleanor said, her voice firm. Support his daughter who is protecting her child or continue enabling destructive behavior. She rose from the table with surprising energy for her age. I should head home. It's getting late. I walked her to the door, suddenly reluctant to see her leave. Eleanor had always been my rock, the voice of reason in family chaos. What would you do, Grandma? I asked as she collected her purse. Eleanor paused, her hand on the doorknob. I would remember that my first responsibility is to protect my child, not to placate adults who should know better. She kissed my cheek gently. Get some rest, Natalie. Tomorrow is another day. After she left, David and I sat on the couch in silence, emotionally exhausted. I keep seeing it happen, I admitted. The look on Lucas's face when she pushed him. The seconds of silence before he started crying. David put his arm around me. We should document the burn, take pictures, just in case. In case of what? I asked, though I understood his implication. In case this escalates, in case we need proof later, his voice was grim. I don't trust Amber, and I certainly don't trust your father to hold her accountable. We took photos of Lucas's cheek as he slept, the angry red mark clearly visible against his pale skin. Then, we retreated to our bedroom, though neither of us slept much that night. Morning brought a flurry of text messages from family members who had heard various versions of the incident. My cousin Lisa wanted to know if it was true that Amber had been asked to leave the party. My Aunt Susan expressed concern about Lucas, but also suggested that family should forgive family. No one notably seemed to be holding Amber accountable for her actions. I was pouring coffee when my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. Grandma, good morning, I answered. Natalie. Her voice sounded unusually tense. I want you to know that I'm at Richard's house. What? Why? I set my mug down in surprise. There are some things that need to be said, and I'm going to say them. I tried calling you earlier, but there was no answer. I checked the missed calls on my phone and saw that she had indeed tried to reach me at 6 in the morning. Grandma, what are you planning to do? What should have been done years ago, she replied cryptically. Don't worry, just stay home with Lucas. I'll call you when it's over. The call ended before I could protest further. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Eleanor was not prone to confrontation or dramatic gestures. Whatever she had planned must be serious. David entered the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Who was that? My grandmother, I said, still staring at the phone. She's at my father's house where Amber is staying. She said she's going to say what should have been done years ago. David's eyebrows shot up. That doesn't sound like Eleanor. No, I agreed. A knot forming in my stomach. It doesn't. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my father. What the hell is going on? Did you send your grandmother here to threaten us? Threaten? David read over my shoulder. What is he talking about? Before I could respond, another text came through, this one from Amber. Your psycho grandma is here with a baseball bat. Come get her before we call the police. David and I exchanged alarmed looks. That can't be right, I said. Eleanor wouldn't. She's 78 years old. We need to go over there, David decided, already moving toward the bedroom to change. I'll stay with Lucas. You go see what's happening. 20 minutes later, I was in my car driving the familiar route to my childhood home, where my father now lived alone except for Amber's temporary residence. My mind raced with scenarios, none of them making sense. Eleanor was the most composed, reasonable person I knew. The idea of her wielding a baseball bat was so incongruous, it seemed like a bad joke. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Eleanor's sensible blue sedan parked at the curb. The house looked peaceful from the outside, no signs of the drama allegedly unfolding within. I approached the front door with trepidation, rang the bell, and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. What I would witness inside would change our family dynamic forever in ways I could never have anticipated. My father opened the door, his face a mask of indignation. Finally, he huffed, stepping aside to let me enter. "Maybe you can talk some sense into your grandmother." The living room came into view as I stepped inside, and the scene before me was so surreal, I momentarily questioned whether I was dreaming. Eleanor sat primly on the edge of the sofa, her posture perfect as always, her handbag neatly placed beside her, and yes, propped against the coffee table was an old wooden baseball bat, worn with age but solid. Amber paced near the window, her hair disheveled, still wearing what appeared to be yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from crying or lack of sleep, I couldn't tell. "Natalie," Eleanor greeted me calmly as if this were a normal social call. "I'm glad you're here. We were just discussing yesterday's events." With a baseball bat, I couldn't help blurting out, gesturing toward the wooden implement. "Oh, this," Eleanor glanced at the bat as if noticing it for the first time. "Just a visual aid for our conversation. I haven't touched it since I set it down." "She brought a weapon into my house," my father exclaimed, throwing his hands up. "Threatened us with it." Eleanor rolled her eyes, an unexpected gesture from a woman of her generation. "Don't be dramatic, Richard. I simply needed to ensure I had everyone's full attention." "It worked remarkably well. What exactly is happening here?" I asked, still trying to process the bizarre tableau. "Your grandmother has lost her mind," Amber spat, crossing her arms defensively. "She showed up at 7 in the morning, banging on the door with that thing, demanding to talk about yesterday, as if it was some huge deal." Eleanor's expression remained serene, but her eyes hardened. "I brought the bat that belonged to your grandfather, Richard," she explained. "The one he used to teach you to play when you were Lucas's age. I thought it might jog your memory about what it means to protect a child." My father shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering to the bat. I suddenly remembered the stories of my grandfather, who died before I was born, teaching my father to play baseball in the backyard of their small house. It had been one of the few happy childhood memories he shared. "This has gone far enough," my father declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "You can't just show up waving a bat around because of a little birthday prank." "A prank?" Eleanor's voice remained level but took on a steely quality I'd rarely heard. "Let me remind you what happened since you seem confused. Your daughter, a grown woman of 31, physically assaulted your 10-year-old grandson on his birthday, causing him actual bodily harm. You then defended this behavior and demanded that the victims apologize to the perpetrator. Which part of that sounds like a prank to you, Richard?" My father opened his mouth, then closed it again without speaking. "I didn't assault anyone," Amber interjected. "It was a cake smash. People do it all the time at parties. To babies on their first birthdays with cakes specifically designed for that purpose and no lit candles," Eleanor corrected her. "Not to 10-year-olds with expensive custom cakes that they haven't even had a chance to enjoy." "But then you knew that, didn't you?" Amber looked away, unable to meet Eleanor's steady gaze. "I came here today," Eleanor continued, "because I've watched this family dynamic deteriorate for years. I've stayed quiet, thinking it wasn't my place to interfere in how Richard raised his daughters. That was my mistake, and one I'm correcting now." She reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. "I took a video yesterday of Lucas opening presents. I kept recording when the cake came out. Would you like to see it again?" The exact moment when childhood joy turns to pain and confusion. Without waiting for a response, Eleanor pressed play and turned the screen toward my father and sister. The tiny sound of "Happy Birthday" filled the silent room, followed by the abrupt silence and Lucas's cry of pain. "Look at his face, Richard," Eleanor instructed. "Not just the physical pain, but the betrayal, the confusion. Your grandson trusted that he was safe among family, and in an instant that trust was broken." My father's face had gone pale. Seeing the incident on video, removed from the heat of the moment and his instinct to defend Amber, seemed to affect him differently. Now, Eleanor continued, tucking her phone away, let me tell you both a story you may not know. When I was 32, my husband died in Vietnam, leaving me alone with Richard, who was 7 at the time. My brother offered to let us move in with his family to help with expenses. One night at dinner, he slapped Richard for reaching for seconds before everyone had been served. Just once, not hard enough to leave a mark. She paused, her eyes fixed on my father. Do you remember what I did, Richard? My father nodded slowly, the color draining from his face. I packed our belongings that night and we were gone before morning. I worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads rather than expose my child to someone who would hurt him. Because that's what parents do. They protect their children no matter the cost, no matter who the threat comes from, even family, especially family. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. I felt a surge of emotion, seeing my grandmother in an entirely new light. The quiet, proper woman who always urged family harmony had a backbone of steel when it mattered most. So here we are, Eleanor concluded, reaching for the baseball bat. She held it not as a weapon, but almost reverently, running her aged fingers along the worn wood. I brought this to make a point, not to threaten violence, but to remind you of legacy. What will yours be, Richard? A father who taught his daughter that hurting children is acceptable? A grandfather who failed to protect his grandson? Is that how you want to be remembered? My father sank into an armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. I never thought of it that way, he admitted quietly. It was just cake, just a joke gone wrong. It was never just cake, I found my voice at last. It was Amber's resentment, and you're enabling a pattern that's been going on my entire life. Yesterday, it crossed a line because it hurt my son, my child, and I won't allow it to continue. Amber made a dismissive sound. Always so perfect, aren't you, Natalie? The good daughter, the good mother. Some of us make mistakes. Mistakes are accidental, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath. What you did was deliberate. You saw an opportunity to ruin something special for my son. And you took it without hesitation. I was drunk, she protested weakly. Another choice, not an excuse, Eleanor countered. And Richard, you've been making excuses for her behavior since she was small. I watched you do it, thinking you would eventually set proper boundaries. I was wrong to stay silent. My father looked between Eleanor, Amber, and me, conflict evident on his face. For perhaps the first time, he was being forced to confront the consequences of decades of favoritism and enabling. What do you want from me? He finally asked, sounding defeated. Accountability, I answered simply, for both of you. Acknowledge what happened, apologize sincerely to Lucas, and commit to making changes so nothing like this ever happens again. And if we don't? Amber challenged, though her usual defiance seemed hollow. Eleanor stood smoothly for her age, the baseball bat held loosely at her side. Then you make your choice and Natalie makes hers. But understand this, both of you. I've lived long enough to know that family is defined by how we treat each other, not by blood alone. If you cannot be trusted to respect boundaries and treat a child with basic kindness, you have no right to be in his life. She walked to the door, pausing to look back at my father. The bat stays with you, Richard, a reminder of what's at stake. Your relationship with your daughter and grandson or your continued enabling of behavior that hurts them both. Choose wisely. With that, she walked out, leaving the 3 of us in a silence charged with unspoken emotions and decisions that would shape our family's future. I looked at my father and sister, seeing them with new clarity. Lucas's burn will heal, I said quietly. But his memory of yesterday and what happens next will last forever. The same is true for me. The choice is yours. As I turned to follow my grandmother outside, I realized that the confrontation had shifted something fundamental in our family dynamic. Whether it would lead to healing or permanent fracture remained to be seen, but the old patterns had been irrevocably disrupted. For better or worse, we could never go back to the way things were before. The days following Eleanor's baseball bat intervention unfolded in a series of tense conversations and uncomfortable revelations. I returned home from my father's house to find David and Lucas building a Lego space station, a deliberate distraction from the family drama. Lucas's cheek still bore the mark from the candle burn, a physical reminder of wounds both visible and hidden. "How did it go?" David asked when Lucas was out of earshot retrieving more Lego pieces from his room. "Surreal," I admitted, still processing the morning's events. "Grandma actually brought Dad's old baseball bat, though she never threatened anyone with it. She just made them listen, really listen, maybe for the first time." David's eyebrows rose. "Eleanor, our Eleanor, who bakes cookies and does crossword puzzles. Turns out there's a lot about her I never knew," I said, recounting the story she had shared about leaving her brother's home to protect my father as a child. "She's stronger than I realized." Later that evening, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. I stepped onto the back porch to take the call, watching through the window as David helped Lucas get ready for bed. "Natalie," my father began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been thinking about what your grandmother said, about what happened yesterday." I remained silent, waiting. "I've always tried to keep the peace," he continued. "With Amber, I know I've made excuses. After your mother left, I didn't want to lose anyone else." The reference to my mother's abandonment when I was 12 and Amber was 9 hung between us, an old wound rarely acknowledged. "Dad, making excuses for Amber isn't keeping the peace. It's enabling behavior that hurts others. Yesterday it hurt Lucas, physically hurt him." "I know," he admitted quietly. "Seeing that video, hearing him cry. I didn't see it clearly yesterday. I was so busy defending Amber that I missed what was right in front of me." "And now?" I prompted. "I want to apologize to Lucas, to you and David, in person, if you'll allow it." "What about Amber?" A heavy sigh came through the phone. "She's struggling, Natalie. After you left, she broke down completely. Admitted she's been drinking too much since the divorce. Said she was jealous of your family, your stability. She's agreed to talk to someone, a therapist." "That's a start," I acknowledged, "but it doesn't erase what happened." "No, it doesn't. But it might be a step toward making sure it never happens again." We arranged for my father to visit the following weekend, alone. Amber would not be welcome in our home until she had demonstrated genuine change, and Lucas felt comfortable seeing her again. When I shared this development with David, he was skeptical. "One conversation with your grandmother and suddenly they're both seeing the light?" "I don't buy it." "I don't think it's that simple," I admitted. Dad sounded sincere. "But this pattern has been in place for decades. Real change will take time, if it happens at all." News of the birthday incident and its aftermath spread through our extended family like wildfire, with sides quickly being drawn. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister, called to express outrage, not at Amber's behavior, but at our overreaction and Eleanor's inappropriate intervention. "Family problems should stay within the family," she lectured. "Threatening people with baseball bats, what will the neighbors think?" "I care more about my son's safety than neighborhood gossip," I replied before ending the call. My cousin Lisa, on the other hand, reached out with support. "About time someone stood up to Amber," she texted. "She's been getting away with murder for years because Uncle Richard always covers for her." The fracture lines in our family became increasingly clear as the week progressed. Those who prioritized surface harmony and the appearance of family unity sided with Amber and my father. Those who valued accountability and protecting the vulnerable supported Eleanor's actions and our boundaries. Lucas, meanwhile, returned to school with a small bandage covering the healing burn on his cheek. When asked about it, he matter-of-factly told his classmates, "My aunt pushed my face into my birthday cake with the candles still lit because she has problems." His straightforward honesty, free from the complicated emotional layers adults would add, was refreshingly simple. The weekend arrived, bringing my father to our doorstep. He stood awkwardly on the porch holding a small gift bag and looking years older than he had at the birthday party just a week before. "Is Lucas home?" he asked after I invited him in. "He's in the backyard with David. They're setting up his telescope for tonight." I gestured toward the living room. "We should talk first before you see him." My father nodded, following me to the couch. He placed the gift bag on the coffee table but made no mention of it. How's Amber? I asked, more out of obligation than genuine interest. She had her first therapy session yesterday, he replied. The therapist suggested she might have issues with alcohol on top of everything else. Recommended a support group. Will she go? He shrugged. She says she will. I hope so. He paused, fidgeting with his watch. I've been doing some thinking, Natalie, about how I've treated you and Amber differently over the years. That's putting it mildly, I commented, unable to keep the edge from my voice. After your mother left, Amber fell apart. You seemed so strong, so capable of handling everything. I think I convinced myself you didn't need me as much. It was an old excuse, one I'd heard in various forms throughout my life. I was 12, Dad. I wasn't strong. I was terrified. I just didn't show it the same way Amber did. I know that now, he admitted. Or I'm trying to know it. Your grandmother has been quite direct in her observations this week. Despite everything, I smiled slightly. I bet she has. The thing is, my father continued, I think I've been unfair to Amber, too, in a way. By never holding her accountable, I never gave her the chance to grow up properly, to learn from mistakes. It was a surprisingly insightful observation from a man who had spent decades avoiding such realizations. That's true, I acknowledged. But understanding the problem doesn't automatically fix it. No, he agreed. But it's a start. David appeared at the patio door, Lucas visible behind him examining something through the telescope. My husband raised an eyebrow in silent question, and I nodded, indicating it was okay to bring Lucas in. My son entered cautiously, his eyes immediately finding the small bandage on his cheek. His expression was guarded, unusual for a typically open and trusting child. Hi, Grandpa, he said, stopping a few feet away. Lucas, my father's voice cracked slightly. I came to say I'm sorry for what happened at your party, for not protecting you like a grandfather should. Lucas considered this. Aunt Amber was the one who pushed me. Yes, she was, and I should have been angry at her for hurting you, not defending her. That was wrong of me. Is she sorry too? Lucas asked with the direct simplicity of children. My father hesitated. She says she is. She's getting help for some problems she has that made her act the way she did, but that doesn't excuse what she did to you. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. Great-grandma said sometimes adults make bad choices and other adults need to make sure they have consequences. My father looked startled, then rueful. Your great-grandma is a wise woman, wiser than I've been. He gestured to the gift bag on the table. I brought you something. It's not to make up for what happened because I know I can't fix that with a present. It's just something I thought you might like for your telescope. Lucas looked to me for permission before approaching the bag. Inside he found a book of astronomical charts and a set of specialized lens filters. These help you see different features on the planets, my father explained. I asked at the science store what would be good for a beginner telescope. Thank you, Lucas said politely, though without his usual enthusiasm for space-related gifts. Would you show me how your telescope works? My father asked, if that's okay with your mom and dad. Lucas looked to us again. David nodded slightly. For a little while. We were in the middle of aligning it for tonight. As Lucas led my father outside, David hung back with me. You okay? He asked quietly. I think so, I said, watching through the window as Lucas began explaining his telescope to my father with cautious animation. This is just the beginning, though. One apology doesn't erase years of patterns. No, David agreed. But it's something. The next few months brought tentative changes to our family structure. My father made consistent efforts to connect with Lucas on his own terms, showing genuine interest in his astronomy hobby and school activities. He attended Lucas's science fair without Amber, proudly photographing his solar system display that won third place. Amber remained in therapy and, according to my father, was actively participating in an alcohol support group. She sent Lucas a handwritten apology letter which, while not perfect, acknowledged the hurt she had caused without excuses. Lucas read it carefully, then placed it in his desk drawer without comment. "Do you want to see Aunt Amber?" I asked him a few weeks later. He considered the question seriously. "Not yet," he finally decided. "Maybe when my face doesn't have a mark anymore." The small burn had indeed left a tiny scar on his cheek, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking for it, but a permanent reminder of that birthday. The pediatrician assured us it would likely fade completely with time. Eleanor became something of a family hero to Lucas after the full story of her baseball bat confrontation emerged. "Great-grandma is like a ninja," he declared admiringly. "Quiet but powerful." The extended family remained divided. Thanksgiving approached with complicated negotiations about who would attend which gatherings. My Aunt Susan hosted a dinner that included Amber but not us. My father declined her invitation, choosing instead to join us and Eleanor for a smaller celebration. "Families change," Eleanor observed as we prepared the Thanksgiving meal together. "Sometimes they need to break apart to heal properly, like a bone that's been set wrong." Looking around our kitchen, at David teaching Lucas to make gravy, at my father setting the table with careful precision, at Eleanor herself kneading dough with hands gnarled by arthritis but still strong, I realized she was right. Our family had fractured, but perhaps it had broken along lines that needed to separate. What remained was smaller but stronger, built on respect rather than obligation, on accountability rather than enabling. It wasn't perfect, and the healing was far from complete, but it was real. And for that, despite everything, I found myself genuinely thankful. 6 months after the birthday party incident, spring had given way to summer. The tiny scar on Lucas's cheek had faded to the point where only those who knew to look for it could find it, a pale crescent barely visible when he smiled. The emotional scars, however, were taking longer to heal, though progress was evident in small but significant ways. We celebrated Lucas's half-birthday with a much smaller gathering, just our immediate family, Eleanor, and 2 of Lucas's closest friends. The cake was modest but beautiful, a simple chocolate confection decorated with edible stars. When it came time to blow out the candles, Lucas hesitated briefly, a flash of memory crossing his face, before leaning forward confidently to make his wish. "No faceplants today," he joked afterward, a sign that he was finding ways to process what had happened with the resilience children often demonstrate. Amber's journey toward accountability and healing had been uneven but persistent. According to my father, she had maintained her therapy sessions and attendance at support group meetings. 3 months of sobriety had given her a clarity she hadn't possessed in years, bringing painful realizations about her behavior patterns. "I'd been jealous of you since we were kids," she admitted during a carefully arranged coffee meeting, just the 2 of us at a neutral location. "You were always so capable, so put together. Dad looked to you to be the strong one, even though he gave me more attention." I resented both things somehow. "I never saw myself that way," I told her. "I always felt like I was struggling to earn the approval you got automatically." She looked genuinely surprised. "Really? I always thought Dad loved you more. He just felt obligated to take care of me because I was such a mess." It was a revelation for both of us, how differently we had experienced the same family dynamic. Not an excuse for her actions, but perhaps a starting point for understanding. "I want to see Lucas," she said as our meeting ended. "When he's ready, if he's ever ready." "I understand if the answer is no." "I'll talk to him," I promised, making no commitments. My father's transformation had been perhaps the most surprising. After decades of enabling Amber and dismissing my concerns, he had begun the difficult work of examining his own role in our family dysfunction. He started seeing a counselor of his own, something I never would have expected from a man of his generation who considered therapy a sign of weakness. "I failed both my daughters," he confessed during a private conversation. "I favored Amber because she reminded me of your mother, fragile and needing protection. I took you for granted because you reminded me of myself, or who I wanted to be, strong and self-sufficient. Neither of you got what you actually needed from me." His acknowledgement, while painful to hear, was also healing in its honesty. For the first time, I felt truly seen by my father, not as a projection of his expectations, but as myself with all my complexities and needs. Eleanor, now approaching her 79th birthday, watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. The baseball bat had been returned to its place in my father's garage, but its symbolic impact remained a powerful reminder of the moment our family's unhealthy patterns were finally confronted. I should have spoken up years ago, she reflected during one of our regular Sunday dinners. Sometimes wisdom comes with age, but sometimes age just gives you the courage to use the wisdom you already had. Lucas, approaching 11, had developed a thoughtful perspective on family relationships that seemed beyond his years. When a classmate was dealing with parental conflict, he offered advice that caught the attention of his teacher, who later mentioned it to me. Lucas told Jamie that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices because they're hurting inside, but that doesn't make the bad choices okay, she reported. He said it's important to forgive people who are really trying to change, but also important to have consequences and boundaries. I was quite impressed with his emotional intelligence. I recognized Eleanor's phrasing in his words, evidence of how deeply children absorb the lessons modeled around them, for better or worse. The decision to allow Amber back into Lucas's life came gradually, first supervised video calls where she showed genuine interest in his activities and achievements, then a brief meeting in a public park with David and me present, finally, an invitation to join a family dinner at our home, contingent on her continued sobriety and respectful behavior. "Are you sure about this?" David asked the night before the dinner. "We can cancel if you have any doubts." "I'm not completely sure," I admitted. "But I think it's the right next step. Lucas needs to see that people can change, that making amends is possible. Otherwise, what lesson does he learn from all this?" The dinner was awkward but peaceful. Amber brought a small gift for Lucas, a book about women astronomers, that showed thoughtful consideration of his interests. She made no grand speeches or dramatic apologies, just engaged in normal conversation and helped clear the table afterward. Small acts of ordinary family participation that felt significant in their normality. As summer progressed, our family continued its careful reconstruction. The fracture lines remained visible, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the damage part of the object's history rather than something to disguise. Some extended family relationships remained severed. My Aunt Susan continued to insist we had overreacted, and eventually I stopped trying to justify our boundaries to someone who refused to respect them. Other relatives, seeing the positive changes in Amber and my father, gradually reconnected, accepting the new family dynamic. One evening in late August, I found Lucas in the backyard with his telescope, my father beside him pointing out constellations in the darkening sky. They didn't notice me watching from the patio door, absorbed in their shared interest. "That small star there is actually a whole galaxy millions of light years away," my father was explaining. "The light we're seeing started its journey before humans even existed on Earth." Lucas adjusted his telescope slightly. "So we're looking at the past, not what it actually looks like now." "Exactly. By the time the light reaches us, everything has changed. But that doesn't make what we're seeing any less real or beautiful." I was struck by the unintentional metaphor in their astronomical discussion. Our family was indeed seeing each other's light from the past, acknowledging that much had changed in the interim, yet finding value in the connection nonetheless. As Lucas's 11th birthday approached, we discussed how to handle the celebration, conscious of the previous year's trauma. "I still want a party," Lucas decided. "But maybe smaller, with just people who make me feel good." "What kind of cake would you like?" I asked carefully. He thought for a moment. "Something simple. But I still want candles. I'm not going to let one bad experience ruin birthday candles forever." His resilience brought tears to my eyes. "That's very brave, Lucas." He shrugged. "Great-grandma says that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are scared because they matter to you." Eleanor's wisdom again, filtering through to the next generation. The day of Lucas's 11th birthday arrived with clear skies and gentle warmth. The gathering was indeed smaller than the previous year but filled with genuine affection and support. Amber had been invited, conditional on her continued sobriety and positive behavior, which she had maintained. She arrived on time, sober, with a modest age-appropriate gift. When the cake appeared, a simple chocolate creation decorated with stars, everyone grew quiet. The memory of last year's disaster hung unspoken in the air. Lucas stood before it, looking at the 11 candles with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. My father stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Make a wish, grandson," he said softly. "We're all here to celebrate you exactly as you are." Lucas took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, then blew out all 11 candles in one go. The small gathering erupted in applause, not just for the extinguished flames, but for the moment of healing they represented. Later, as guests departed and we began cleaning up, Eleanor found me in the kitchen wrapping leftover cake. "You've done well, Natalie," she said, helping me stack plates. "Not just today, but these past months. You protected your child while still leaving room for redemption. That's a difficult balance to maintain." "I had a good example," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. "Family isn't just about blood or obligation. It's about choices made daily to treat each other with respect and kindness. The people who consistently make those choices are your true family, whether they share your DNA or not." As the kitchen clock ticked toward midnight, marking the end of Lucas's birthday, I reflected on the journey our family had taken since that disastrous cake incident. We had broken apart, confronted painful truths, and begun the slow process of rebuilding on a healthier foundation. Not everyone had made the journey with us, and the new structure was smaller than before, but it was stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more nurturing. The tiny scar on Lucas's cheek would continue to fade until it disappeared completely, but the lessons learned would remain woven into the fabric of our family story. Sometimes protection requires confrontation. Sometimes healing requires separation. And sometimes the family you rebuild after a fracture is more valuable than the one you started with, precisely because it is chosen rather than merely inherited. As I tucked away the last of the birthday decorations, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for much of my life. The journey wasn't over. The healing not complete, but we were moving in the right direction, guided by love, boundaries, and the quiet wisdom of a 79-year-old woman who knew exactly when to bring a baseball bat to a family intervention.